I think we're short one council member at this point.
You're good to start.
Well, good evening, everyone. My name's Mike Remington, Mayor Pro Tem with the City of Duval. You're joining us for the Duval Committee of the Whole for Tuesday, May 4th, 2021. It's now 5:32 in the evening. Our meeting is officially called to order, and we'll move to our first agenda item, which is good of the order. Any council members have anything they'd like to share? Councilmember McHenry.
More of a question. I saw, and I sorry to anyone earlier about this, just to ask. I don't know, to put Steve on the spot. We had a Public Works Committee meeting, and there seemed to be somewhat of a time-sensitive item that came up. So I didn't see it tonight. Can we anticipate that'll be on an upcoming meeting soon?
Steve, do you remember what the time-sensitive issue was at the
It was
committee?
about the Big Rock ball fields.
Excuse me. Good evening, Steve Loniszewski, Public Works. So yeah, we had Little League come present on behalf of them and a King County Youth Sports grant that they had been in receipt of to begin some preliminary design, layout, and activity on the parcel adjacent to the ball field. So I don't know what we need to officially call it something at some point, but I call it Big Rock Phase 2 or Big Rock East. So that was there. I think, Mike, we've talked a little bit about that.
Is that coming?
Probably.
Sorry. The grant part seemed like something needed to happen by fall, so I thought it was going to come to a cow, and maybe we didn't have time tonight, so I just wanted to check to see when it was going to be up. Mike, did you have insight on that, or?
Well, it is being talked about, and I do think there's some sensitivity on the time of it. So I think there's just more discussion going on to figure out how to craft that and bring it before council. Is that the way you remember it, Steve?
I mean, somewhat, yes. Time sensitivity is just, the goal would be to try to get a preliminary layout and then an application in for the, larger grant pool for development, which is $500,000 plus from what I understand. And that is in fall, so that's towards the end of the year. Some of that is revenue from that new parks levy that is available through the county. So there's granting out of that, and there's also granting out of King County Youth Sports. Part we need to manage is getting into some partnership, as well as understanding, roles, and then just going through the processes to, if the current, I recall, please, it is not on our agenda. It's not in our budget. We did buy it kind of very quickly at the end of the year, nimbly and successfully. So it is there, but we have no programming ready for that. So obviously we need council action to break into that role, get moving on it. I know we spoke on this somewhat. We need community involvement and, design input, and whether they're work charrettes or open houses. So selecting someone is one thing, but also understanding the scope and the community's involvement on a piece of property, right? That's fairly raw, currently not zoned within the city limits of Duval. So there's process there, and I think just the partnership. I've worked with Daniel, our attorney, on getting a resolution put forward should there be momentum to do such. So mayor's supportive of actions, but we need certainly council support to get programming in place to move forward. We certainly don't want to rush anything, and can appreciate free money coming through another partner, but just processes are what they are. So yes, I don't set the schedule for the cow, and it is certainly coming when we can get there. I know Greg, the president of Little League, had a conflict, I think, with actual baseball this evening. I suggested he come maybe to the regular council meeting in under 5 minutes for representing an agency or a group. He could have introduced it. Not that it's a lot of time, but it's something, because we do need to start the process of being engaged. But that's kind of where we are. Yes, I think we had hoped to get in front of people to share the hopes and dreams, and then start to put a process and a vision board together. But I don't know what else to say.
I think about the grant timing, and I don't want to take up too much time, so I apologize, Mike, but I just wanted, I think where I thought we were at the end of the committee meeting was maybe this was something that just kind of preliminarily needed to come before the whole of council. So I don't know if it's possible to even, if not on a cow, then just even give the president of the Snow Valley Little League, a chance to present any information or some history, and just so that we all understand or on the same page, because I know this is something that the whole council is interested in, not just the committee. I don't know if that's possible next time.
Actually, it sure is. I meet with Mayor Okerlander on Thursday morning, and I'll work on getting that scheduled. There's a lot of things that go on behind the scenes just in trying to understand, and we certainly want to get it in front of council. We have a great opportunity with that new property we purchased next to Big Rock, and trying to get it right. I think everybody's really excited, to be honest, about the opportunities that we have in front of us, and working out a process so that we can be inclusive with our citizens and really develop partnership as kind of where we're headed. But it just takes a little bit of work to get there. And so as soon as I talk to the mayor, I'll and have it scheduled, I'll let everybody know. Councilmember Naplin.
Just on the same subject, I do know a little bit about it because Greg Naplin happens to be my husband. And so from what I understand is the grant that he received from King County, what Little League received. And the reason it went through Little League is King County needs a nonprofit. So it doesn't mean this is all about baseball. It just means they needed a nonprofit, and Little League did the legwork. And so I think there might be a little bit of confusion about maybe what this is. From my understanding, the grant would provide enough funding to do some of the feasibility legwork and just come up with some concepts so that when money becomes available, when the next grant submission is due, all that legwork will be done. This is stuff that from my understanding, typically staff would do. They would probably use on call to kind of finish up some of this stuff and have everything they need for a grant submission. Now, through King County, they gave Little League $25,000. They don't have to go through a fancy procurement process because there's a $25,000 limit to where that isn't necessary. And they're just willing to do the legwork so that we don't have to utilize staff time and on-call consultants to pull all of this stuff together. So it really seems like a win-win. And so I'm not 100% sure what kind of relationship needs to be established, but it's not a situation where, an actual design of what is going to be built is going to be the outcome. And I had seen a scope at one point for the consultant that would do this work. And it did include some community input, trying to find out some of the different needs in this community. But once again, it's really pulling together the environmental studies, looking at the property, finding out how things could fit. And it's everything you would need for King County at the next grant cycle to say, yes, you have a viable project. We're willing to give you money. That's my understanding. I'm a little bit confused about why exactly what the holdup is. I think that there's an effort to work with the city to try to get the right information, but the grant was given to Little League and they could technically go out and do a feasibility study outside of the city. I mean, so anyway, I think there's just an effort to try to work together, and I'm not really sure where we're at, but it sounds like maybe there's a more idea of this being more elaborate than reality.
Thank you, Jennifer. I think for some council members, you might be a little bit confused because we haven't opened that and shared all the information with all council members. The committee's had a chance to talk about it, take a look at it, and consider options. And so I don't know we're quite ready to get into a big discussion tonight on that whole process because we haven't laid it all out yet. but there is real excitement. And Jennifer, thanks for helping fill in some of the details here. Certainly council would like to see us be able to move forward with that piece of property, and the fact that there's a grant available and a partnership opportunity. I think that's where this is headed. But I think folks are just being cautious to make sure that especially the piece with public input is there. Councilmember Langle and then Director Laniszewski.
Well, one thing I was going to suggest, I mean, this type of a partnership is, from what I can see, a little different than from what Duval has worked with in the past. So one thing that would help me be prepared is if I just had a copy of the grant application. And I've worked with plenty of nonprofit government partnerships on both sides. So it would definitely help me understand how I can be helpful on a policy and budget level to make sure we get this thing going and that we put ourselves in a position where more money comes into Duval. So if I can get that, that would be like awesome. And then I would be prepared whenever this comes to COW. Grant cycles are very sensitive, and we want to put our best foot forward and show that we can work together, even though this isn't a new partnership. So that would be my request.
Great. Thank you, Dorothy. Director Laniszewski, you had your hand up for a little bit, but it's gone. Are you good now?
I put it down as you acknowledge me. I can leave it up. But I just want to add, so the one thing, speaking to legal, we should engage in a partnership. The city owns the property, the community owns the property, right? Little League is trying to help us kick it off, which is fantastic. But I caution getting into any preliminary design, community shredding. What you bring in preliminary, whether you got the right information or the wrong information, seems to stick a lot of the times, right? Good, bad, or otherwise. So we need to be, it's not that we're designing a park, but yes, we need to hear the community's input, see what shakes out, understand what the site can hold, whether it's X amount of fields, Y amount of places, Z amount of spaces, whatever it is, right? So like I said, legal cautions, we need a resolution, engaging partnership. We need to select a consultant that we can agree to, as well as Little League, who would like to partner and have a seat at the table, which is what that resolution does as we move forward. Council could always make a motion to let Little League run the whole thing, but I don't think anybody wants to do that. We're trying to partner. So it takes time, it takes careful thought, and not that we don't have an amazing facility today, but that was put together without lack of grand vision. And it is the best that we could do at the times that we put things forward. That started prior to my arrival here. It was mostly community-based, local bulldozers. You know, they did what they did to get what they could. But, you know, having a non-perimeter trail is problematic. People like that. They compare the needs, you know, for this space to Parago. Like, hey, the track space is nice. So we're missing some things because the grand vision wasn't there. I just caution, we need to make sure we get the grand vision right to start with the preliminary work and just, you know, move forward in a progressive and collaborative way. Nobody's trying to stop anything, but we also need motion, you know, and an understanding from council that we have nothing planned for this, whether workload wise or expensive cost wise. And I know expenses at this point literally is handled, you know, through Little League for that 25 grand. So that's all.
Well, thank you, Steve. I'll take responsibility on behalf of council to make sure that we get time scheduled. I think getting to hear from the president of Little League directly for all of us would be helpful. I think laying out some plans and hearing from council on what direction council would like to take, especially with community engagement and what the cost might look like, not just in receiving the grant, but obviously there's other grants, as Steve mentioned, up to 500,000 that might be applied to whatever we actually decide to do. So there is a bit of a process. Sometimes this part of our lives is pretty frustrating, especially when there's a grant sitting there waiting to join in and help us out. So I think we can certainly engage and move this forward. Yes, Councilmember Langle.
I just want a clarification. Will I be able to get a copy of the grant?
Not for me, I don't have it. It's
Yeah, we can certainly, Jennifer, I don't want to put you on the spot, but is that something you might be able to talk to the president of Little League and see about getting a copy of the grant for council?
Sure, I need clarification though. Do you want to know what the grant award was that the $25,000 is for? Or do you want to know what the next round of grants are that's like $500,000 to $1 million and what that grant submission is? They're part of the same program. It's the community partnerships and grants. It's the program where they want to partner with nonprofits to, anyway, I'm not sure which one you want. Or maybe
I just want the grant that's been awarded.
Okay.
Okay, that simplifies it. Well, thank you.
Hey, Mike,
Yes, Steve?
I hate to do this, but I don't want to mix up our council members' business and the Little League president. So I would gladly request that and pass it on to council when I receive it. I really think we want to keep Jennifer separate.
Yeah.
Just-
Yeah,
That's
Well,
fine. I don't care who gets it to me. I
Yeah,
just want to
Yeah.
read the grant.
I would be more than happy to ask, and when I receive it, I will pass it on. I understand,
Thank
Greg
you.
Dodd,
Thank
you're
you.
looking for a copy of the grant agreement and its description.
you're a wise man. Thank you. That was well said.
Too many times.
Other items for the good of the order this evening? I'm not seeing any hands up. I will say that Mother's Day is on Sunday. And for all of our mothers in our community, we wish you a happy Mother's Day. We know that it's been a tough year with COVID-19, children at home, challenges with safety and scheduling. We have had moms in our community that have lost loved ones. I know I lost our grandma Ruth last spring at 98 years old. So with that, we wish you a happy Mother's Day. We thank you for all you do for our families and for our community. Our first item was the National League of Cities. Sadly, yesterday, they needed to request rescheduling. So we are working with them to reschedule as soon as we can to a future meeting. So we will move on to item 2, which is our government facilities contract with Sean Tozer and Director Liniszewski with Public Works.
Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem, City Council. This is Sean Tozer, City of Duval Public Works. I'm here to kind of do a quick update on, and I added a couple slides to the previous presentation, but so we'll walk through at least a couple little things. But more or less, we're here to discuss the capital facilities plan, largely as it was presented previously, just to get a little bit more, I think, direction, consensus on where we're going to go, what our goals are, those type of things. I'm trying to make you guys bigger so I can see you. There you go. All right, so you guys can see over here, I would imagine. Perfect. All right. So again, there's not a whole lot that we have that's new at the moment, but we wanted to bring it back and have further discussion. As a quick recap, I think everybody was here. Nobody is unaware of what was going on with our government facilities plan. It was really just, it was very large scale project. So looking at all of our government facilities as a whole, evaluating them, coming up with plans, financial strategies for how to afford either capital improvements or brand new facilities, things like that. So it's a grand visioning document, more or less, that was quite a while in development and again, had a lot of lofty goals in there. So this is an overview from last time. The project description more specifically talks about these operational buildings. So buildings that are occupied by people or that we use on a regular basis. We had also talked about the rec center, the visitor center, and then Doherty Farmstead. So again, it was a top to bottom, all city facilities, looking at their current conditions and what their needs are. As far as which ones those are, I think I snipped most of these out, but again, if you're not familiar, I think most of you, if not all of you are, you've seen these facilities, you've been in them, you visited, or you've driven by. I couldn't find good ones of the shop. There's no very good pictures of the shop. And then the engineering building down here at the treatment plant. But these are from various stages and times of their lives. So looking at the process of what we've done here with this particular project, again, there was a lot of discussion leading up to this. The RFP development was a group effort with admin, I think, and some committee meetings. I know there was discussion, the biennial budget We had, there was Cal and council discussions that were previous to actually solicitations, and then committee and working group meetings as well. And then officially we had the introduction to Cal on 3/16. That was after the RFP was out for advertisement and we were underway searching for a consultant. And I believe that was the day we presented the recommended apparent winner, more or less, the selected consultant. And then on 4/20, we did another presentation discussion at Cal with the specifics of the scope and the fee estimate. And then on 4/26, we had a discussion again with Public Works Committee, and now we're here again today. The project really boils down to these 5 tasks, and these 5 tasks have a lot of bullets and meat behind them. But again, none of this is new to you guys. You guys have seen a lot of this: the facilities condition assessment, city capital facilities improvement plan, operational work planning, plan and financial analysis, and then the planning level options. So what we talked about a bit with the consultant following the 4/20 meeting is we had some discussions and meetings with them. We talked a bit about some of the feedback we received from council and maybe how we could perhaps change the arrangement of the tasks, maybe have some focus a little differently than how this was laid out very linearly and 1 through 5. And maybe it's that we do some 5 before we do 1. Maybe if we do some 5 before 1, we reduce 1 a little bit. So we had some real general high level discussions about their comfort level with that. They indicated they were pretty open to working with a few different arrangements, but it really, I mean, at the end of the day, it really depends on what the city's goals are and what the city wants and what the city's trying to accomplish. So it's very hard to discuss or scope a new project until we know those things. So ultimately, after discussions with committees, we have a few options available to us, but after the discussion with the committees, we wanted to come back with the project largely intact and as is, and discuss the merits of that again as a whole. And I hope I covered all that correctly, Steve. There you are, Steve. Yes, and in the committee. So.
Yeah, I think council's concern at the last meeting when we did introduce this was, maybe, hey, are we going to need to really assess every structure we've got for the good of the order or not? And then maybe some task 5, do we bring some preliminary planning and scoping forward on different strategies? Should we be able to say, you know what, let's just call a spade here, and we know we're never going to rebuild City Hall because maybe our policy is the city shouldn't be occupying really hot commercial space on Main Street, right? That's for the private business entities. So we don't have anything like that. So we did talk about that with the consultant. We had a great conversation at Public Works Committee. I think the committee, and I can ask the chair to chime in too, put Councilmember McHenry on the spot, make sure she's carrying the load for the committee. But I think it's something where, the bulk of the work, I think the group agreed needed to be done. I think maybe some of the facilities we thought we wouldn't want to assess, let's say Doherty and Depot, I just asked as the person who's responsible to operate and maintain these structures, those older structures, actually, I would prefer a plan from a professional to help guide us in the future on how we handle those, those relics of yesteryear on behalf of the community and the preservation. So some things I think floated to the top as being, kept. The bulk of it, from my understanding, is interested in being kept. But maybe we tweak a couple things, and if there's time tonight to really, cut a couple things off the table, I think a term I heard was functionally obsolete. If we want to just do some of that work, we can. I think all in all, when we talked about tweaking this with the consultant, the price is probably the same no matter if we add a little to task 5 or take a little from task 1. So I think the synergy on getting it done is there from our committee. The consultant's on board with being as expansive or constricting as we want to get with this, but we don't see a whole lot of change, just maybe pushing and pulling a couple levers to move things from task 1 to task 5, and that's said. So I think Sean, maybe Councilmember McHenry, excuse me, if you want to maybe chime in and see what the next steps, with the group are, because I think the majority of consensus is we need to do something, but how much of what was kind of where we were at.
Yeah, I think both of you summarized really well. And especially that last point was one I was wanting you to bring up again, because it was something I hadn't really thought about or heard, I think, before, which was the value of even those properties. Do we really need to, have Doherty looked at or evaluated? But you mentioning the maintenance, and I think so many times how do we predict what we'll need to properly maintain a building? Well, this is what we budgeted for it before, but this kind of study really dives in and actually gets a little fact base behind that instead of just, well, this is what we started with and we generally use most of it. So I really appreciated that perspective, and I hadn't thought of that before. So I think, I don't want to speak for anyone else on the committee, but in general, we did all seem comfortable with, like, this is the time to move forward and get this going. And this seems like a valuable piece or component to getting to a point of a city hall or something, and making it so that we get to a point where the community understands what we're dealing with, what choices we have, and they know we've taken it very seriously to evaluate options. I don't know, does anyone else on the committee want to jump in or say anything, or maybe we just open it up at this point? I think we just want to know what to do at this point, or where everyone else on council is.
Councilmember Schaefer.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I just kind of want to reiterate what Amy was saying and what Steve was saying. We can try to nickel and dime this and, reduce our overall cost, but I think that would come back and bite us. We have occupied buildings that absolutely need to be assessed, if nothing else, for the health and safety of our workers there. But in addition to that, hopefully can gain some insight as far as efficiency and how to rearrange those facilities in a little bit better way than what they are now, because we are going to be in them for some number of years to come before we do get a new city hall. The buildings that are lightly or non-occupied, as Steve said, we still have to maintain those buildings. We still have to do something with them, sell them or whatever. But an assessment will help us tremendously along those lines. So I'm personally not in favor of trying to cut down this cost of the assessment by at least by any great amount. I would trust our own, our staff, if they say, well, maybe we can cut a few dollars here and there, and certainly I'm all in favor of that. But I don't think we can do anything significant as far as the cost is concerned. That's it. Thanks, Mike.
Councilmember Brunicki, and then Councilmember Langle.
Yes, I would agree with the other two council members. It's been over 10 years that I've watched the process of the facilities go through what seems to be a very circle situation. And if we don't do this study, we will just continue to perpetuate what we have done for over 10 years, where we look, we don't quite understand, and then what we do is we put it off, or we ask staff to put some time in and do some sort of investigative work. And I would say that from all the years I have watched this process, the amount of money we have spent to be where we're at today far probably exceeds what we're going to invest. And so I'm really for moving forward with this and doing it in a manner that we can get value out of what we invest in. So as Council Member Schaefer said, nickel and diming may not be the best way to go about it. And working with staff over the years, they're always very aware. They're the ones who are into the weeds of these projects and know where to cut the costs, what to do. They've always, over the years, have done an amazing job at figuring out how to squeeze water out of a stone. So I think, it's a good investment. Now is a good time.
Thank you. Councilmember Langle.
Okay, so I have a very different take on this, and I'm going to enumerate them. Number one, we've already paid people to inspect the existing buildings, and they identified the deficiencies, and largely the buildings were not maintained by the city. That is very clear in the reports. Number two, we have already allocated funds to address a number of the issues, and those allocations were based on the administration's recommendations. And I think we need to go ahead and do that work. We are very, very blessed to be getting some additional funds for the police station, which gives us a little more room if we need to do some things. So I really think that we are forgetting a large amount of time we spent last February discussing, and Steve used a term that I have used many times, functional obsolescence. I think we need to think about two things. There is a difference between planning for a new city hall, which is a product of space planning and, working with our staff, thinking about what kind of service delivery methods we want to provide for our citizens, and the issue of whether we ever sell the other buildings. And even if we look at the other buildings and assess them, what would we be assessing them for? And I think without community process, we don't even know what we would be assessing them for. So I guess the way I see reordering these tasks, which is different than the question of how much money you spend. But to me, and I've already shared these comments with Steve, the way I see this, and this is based actually on what Sean Tozer told us at our last presentation. So I want to acknowledge that this is what this is based on. There is a core amount of work here that really is about the space we need to provide to staff for delivery of services to the public. That is a really, really big question. And it takes quite a bit of time and a really very community-minded firm to figure out that piece. So that's sort of one bubble of information. The second bubble of information, and this has to do with how we prioritize spending money, is the future of our existing buildings and whether we sell them or not. And I think until we even talk to the community about their visioning for those buildings, I don't even know how we would direct our architectural team to assess them. And because we're not starting from a place that is community-based with those buildings. And, we can sit there and think about those buildings all we want as a council and as administration, but those buildings are seen by the community as their personal treasures. And that piece is a little different than talking about staff needs, square footage assessments, what a building would look like, how much money we save, and I really underscore save to build a city hall, service delivery, make sure that's top notch for our citizens. We're kind of commingling these things. And, again, we've already allocated in this budget process $660,000 from REIT to look at a remodel of the Public Works building. Question, do we put that on hold? We've already allocated money to improve the buildings that we have. Do we put that on hold? I mean, I'm getting very confused, and I understand this type of process. I really think the sentiment that we all should say sentiment. I think the thing that we understand as a council, I've heard people say this, is we are reaching a size as a city where we've got to look at a different type of space to be sure we're serving the citizens and doing it so that it also supports staff. So I would like to see whatever money we spend to really prioritize getting that piece going. So we have a sense of where we're going to. And in that mix, we also talk to our citizens about what they need. How do they want to see services delivered to them? And then also, we have these existing buildings. In the meantime, we've already allocated money for these other things. Are we going to spend it? Are we going to rescind it? I don't understand how this is integrating. And I brought this up during the process in my comments before the RFP was issued, and I still don't have clarity on that. And it's not to me about how much money we spend or all the tasks, that how are we breaking these things out? And I realize I've gone on a bit, but I've thought about this a lot. And in all the years I've done development, I cannot envision adaptive reuse of our existing buildings on Main Street to meet the future service delivery needs of the city. And I also can't envision letting those buildings get reprogrammed without a lot of community discussion. So however this gets ordered or moneyed out is, to me, needs to be driven by that. I'm not afraid to spend money. I'm not afraid to have a complete plan. I just don't understand the order in which we're doing this. And I feel like it's all getting kind of jumbled up. So I too much words. I apologize. I've thought about it a lot.
Great.
It's a great team, architectural team, so that isn't the issue either.
Thank you. A couple hands here, Councilmember Naplin and Councilmember Hoag.
Yeah, I'm just thinking back about the discussion we had at the last meeting, and I feel like the general feedback was requesting that staff go back and find an option that perhaps was not so broad. I feel like we threw everything plus the kitchen sink into this, and we need to think, what is our goal in the end? And I think what we want to see is a path forward. And I think the scope of this just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. We started out with budgeting $50,000, and the expectation was that I think we would, not end up being asked to spend $300,000. So there's a bit of a disconnect. And so it's a little confusing to me. I really do feel like council asked for options and said, can you work to pare this down to really the essence of what we're trying to accomplish? And it seems like it's still like we're going to hire someone to look at every building for potential earthquake issues, buildings we may not want to even keep, and do designs for how you would retrofit the building. I mean, if we don't even know if we want to keep a building or how it's going to be used, I mean, there's a lot of historic buildings out there. You don't have to retrofit it for an earthquake. And draw up structural designs, and it feels overkill. And that is not the intent. When we set aside $50,000, it was, let's get a consultant to help facilitate us making a decision, understanding what we need for the future. And somehow it morphed into, let's go to every building with a fine-tooth comb and find every single possible thing that we could fix on it, come up with a plan. And I feel like we sort of already did that. Last year we hired someone to look at all our buildings. Staff came up with a plan. We already programmed money to fix all the deficiencies we've seen. And so it's just kind of, anyway, I will stop. But I do feel like council gave a direction to staff to say, bring us back another option that would be closer and pared down to what our initial expectation was. So.
Thank you. Councilmember Hoag.
So I feel like Councilmember Naplin and Councilmember Lingle kind of said similar things to how I'm feeling, but I even called the mayor after our last meeting and talked with her about this, but it sounds like we kind of, the council wants some direction on building a new city hall. But I feel like spending a bunch of money trying to figure out what to do with our existing buildings, to me, isn't money well spent if our ultimate goal is to get a new city hall. We know that most of the buildings don't have enough footprint for us to build a big city hall on them. I don't believe. I mean, so I just feel like in the past, we got tied into trying to sell the rec center. We moved a tenant out of the property and did an appraisal, and we wanted to sell the rec center, and it never came to be. And so it just seems like, I don't feel like if we tie in all of our real estate that we own into a decision on a city hall, it just feels like it's not going to ever happen. We need to just move forward, and eventually we'll figure out what to do with our buildings, is what I'm thinking. I don't think that should be tied into our city hall, because they're not going to go on any of those structures. I mean, unless it were the police station, possibly. I've heard of that as a possibility, but anyways, that's kind of my thoughts. And it really isn't about money. It's about, it is a little bit about money for me, but it's mostly about time spent on researching these properties again for earthquake. I just feel like why even bother? We know that they're very old. So I don't know that. Anyways, thanks.
Thank you. Councilmember Brunicki.
I think I was thinking more in terms of, I'm getting confused by this conversation. I was thinking, looking through the plan and the scope and everything, that, so from my experience and Councilmember Lingo, I've put a lot of thought, I've put 10 years into this. And because of that, what I was understanding was that by doing this process, we would finally get to the place where, one, the staff had all the information and the details, and we could actually, the problem I always see, I'll be pretty frank, we sit down to have this conversation, and I've been through it through numerous councils, numerous years. We always arrive at the same point where the staff doesn't have enough information to get us through to the next stage. The council is not sure what to do because they need more information, and everybody gets like scared. And so there's no decision made. And that's why 10 years has gone by and we're still having the exact same conversation. And what I see is we keep sending the staff out. We keep making them do all these side projects. We keep asking them for this study, go and hire a little, 1,000 here, 5,000 there. Let's get this, consultant in. And so it goes. And before you know it, I did the math in my head. I said, man, I think we've spent, when I calculate the staff, my time, and how many times I've looked through this, and how many discussions and how many meetings and how many committees where we have not moved forward. I think that this, I'm hoping, and my thought was looking at this is going to be the key to get us to start to move forward, as well as the staff, enabling the staff to assess all these structures, because yes, they're old. And that's why it's important that we start doing something. We have historical buildings, which, yes, if the community loves that depot and everything, that's not really going to be affected because it's under its strict regulations, as well as the Doherty farm. So the community need not worry. Those are never going to go away ever. But for the practical things like, engineering and the practical places, I think our constituents expect us to sit here and really make some good progress on maintaining those facilities so that government can function. And that's what I was looking at when I saw this, and I'm hoping for, and that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Diane. I'd like to jump in just a moment, Dot, before I call on you again. I've changed my mind on this a little bit, partly because we had a really good meeting with the Public Works Committee, dove into depth and talked about options. I think for those of you that have heard me, I thought, let's not waste money looking at Doherty and maybe the depot. They're going to be around a long time. But then I realized this is a facility plan. It's not a brand new city hall plan. Let's, jump way ahead. We need to look at our facilities. I also realized that we as council members have struggled with this. I've struggled with it. We've had retreats. We've looked at the numbers. We evaluated buildings. We tried to sell stuff. We ought to keep it. And we haven't been in a place, at least I haven't been in a place where I could just solidly say, let's do this. And so we were a little all over the board. My hope now is that we can do a full facility study. I think the architects are smart enough to know that those that we're going to keep, they need to look at a little bit more so we can make sure we have a plan for the future. I think Steve, as director overseeing facilities, needs that as well. And Dot's right, we did some of that already, but I think bringing in somebody and having another look would be helpful in terms of the overall plan. Another important part for me was, I think what I hear is most of us think that we're going to be in a new city hall. We don't know exactly when, but we think that's where we're headed. I think the space needs analysis, all the things that Dot mentioned, she's got a lot of background here and she's exactly right. There's a lot of things we need to take a look at to help us to get to that point. And sometimes our citizens need to hear it. We did a study, here's where we're at. I think we realize the new city hall probably isn't going to be our current city hall. We know that the police facility, just being an old fireman, the term we used was not the functionality part. It's just, it's beyond its practical life. And so many advances that we need to get into our police department. So how do we get there? I think this study is it. I think that this is one of the most important things that this council is embarking on. It's our future. I'll be gone some point, but somebody will say, boy, somebody did quite the planning job to figure out a new city hall. How do we take care of the Doherty farm and the depot? What do we do in the meantime? And like some of my fellow council members, I get that we embarked in just similar discussions during budget and said, yeah, let's take a look at upgrading the public works building. But we realize even if you decided tonight, let's get a new city hall, right? It's not going to happen for years. So we have to do something in the meantime. So yes, we got a foot on the boat and a foot on the dock, and we're not ready to jump into a new city hall tonight, but we still have to take care of our workers. We still have to upgrade the buildings. So it's always tough when you got that new car you're buying and the old one you're getting rid of, but do I fix it up to make a little more or make it last a little longer until we can do it? It's just a tough spot. But tonight, I'm ready to say, where does Mike Remington stand? I'm ready to go with this study. I'm a little taken back by the dollars. Yes, I'd like to have a architect consider that, okay, you don't plan on using City Hall likely, so we can maybe do some modification and save you some money. I think we can work with them on that. They're partnering in this. But I think we need this plan. I think our citizens need this plan. We need it for our decision-making. We need to have the facts. We need some guidance because we haven't gotten too far yet with all the hard work we put in. So anyway, I'm just telling you where I'm at. I've changed my mind from let's really pare this thing down to, I think it makes full sense to do a full-on study, get the information. There's a lot to this. As I said, we put a lot on the table, but I think it'll be immensely helpful for all of us in our decision process. Dot, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I'd like to put forward sort of a thinking process here. The first thing we need, I don't care how many facilities we look at, we have to have a space analysis. That is a task one. It doesn't matter whether it's a new city hall or we're reusing interim, whatever, we need to have that. That is task one we need to have. And, that means spending time with having the architect spend time, talking to staff, looking at how work flows, all of those kinds of things. Doesn't matter whether a city hall is the top priority or it's a facility, the existing facilities. That's the first thing. So that's one suggestion. Again, to me, it's not the amount of the money, it's how we do this. That either that or you could get a very expensive study that doesn't do what you need to do. My second question to everybody is, what do you want to do with the money we just allocated? Do you want to rescind it? Do you want to reprogram it? The money that was allocated was requested by council, by the administration. We approved it. It is very core things that have to be done, in my view. I'll just look at City Hall as one example. Our furnace doesn't work. It doesn't have the right kind of filtering to deal with things like viruses. That work has to go forward, whether we build a new City Hall or we do this study. That work needs to proceed. That's my view on that. That we can't avoid spending some of those repair dollars. I'm familiar with Weatherholt. They're an excellent firm. I don't think we need them to evaluate the roof on the visitor center. I think our on-call architect can probably do that and give us a roof spec. But first thing we got to do is just clean the roof. We've never cleaned the roof for years. And so you don't need Weatherholt for that. I'll tell you right now, they're an excellent firm, but you don't need them to evaluate the roof at the visitor center. And we have full service civil engineering firms that do structural investigation, design of bridges. We have multiple civil engineers that do that under on-call contract right now. If you need to have seismic ties designed, for the foundations, you've got that service right now. So I would just like to know two things from council. Do they agree that space planning is the #1 priority? When that space, that is a scoping of what our employees need. We really, to do their jobs and deliver service to the public. Can we at least agree that that is a top priority? And then the second thing I just need to know is, what do you want to do on spending this money? Because even redesigning the Public Works building is going to require some space planning. This is why I've always raised these questions. I just like somebody to answer those two things, because it's not to me about the overall scope. It's about the sequence of events under the contract. I just don't understand the phasing. I think it's extraordinarily important that we at least, I feel like we ultimately know we're going to do a new city hall. We might be able to do it sooner than later. So the sooner we understand our space needs, wherever they are, the better off we're going to be. I guess it's not about the money for me. It's about how we go about implementing this contract.
Well, Dot, you asked a couple of questions on there. I don't know if Director Laniszewski or Sean can help me with this. Dot has brought up the space needs analysis, and I think most would say, what is it we need, right? Talk to our employees and figure out, what do you need for the future, what that growth looks like. I thought that was part of this overall plan, that they would do that space needs analysis. Was I wrong in that? And what would that look like? Dot brought up another key point, phasing. And Steve, you mentioned the linear aspect of the way it's laid out, but maybe that's what we move forward earlier, is to say, let's start doing that analysis to make sure we know what we need. Is that something you can shed some light on tonight?
Sure. You want me to go first, Sean?
Yeah.
Go into the detail. So,
Yeah, sure.
made some notes here. We'll try to attack several things. We do have 2 other items on here. Obviously, this is important. We have a council item on this too, so we can always continue it there, just to be cognizant of those 2 other items. But, so I guess if you step back and know nothing, right? The buildings were inspected by a real estate inspection facility person. Good information. Looking back on how this is tasked out from start to finish, if we didn't know anything, somebody comes in, they looks at it all, they figure out what we need, then they tell us if we can or can't keep it in what we've got or what else we need. So there is a linear approach. I think the full assessment of our task 1, that can be embargoed, that can be paused, that can be on hold until the preliminary scoping is done. So you could see the space planning, and we have a check-in, of course. And then, then we go from there. Then we can really see, hey, do we need to worry about buildings A through G or not? Like there's ways to cut things out, but yet get this going in a way that I don't want to pick it apart. I don't want to diminish what was done previously, but if we want to consider something, which is why this was so robust, can we consider putting the space planning needs that we need of, building Y in building Y? Like, so there's reasons things were programmed that way. Certainly think we can do that. The wastewater treatment plant engineering building, anybody is welcome to correct me if I'm wrong. Yes, it is budgeted, but that money is embargoed, predicated on this activity happening. Like somebody from outside our wall saying, hey, that's a great idea. You guys, you're on the ball, or you know what, well, let's think about this and go from there. So we weren't planning on spending that $600,000+ until we got some support out of this group. So I certainly think we could, take it to the next level, talk about holding back task 1 for assessment until we can understand spatial needs, and then put together a roadmap that doesn't look all that different, but maybe some of the loops are just a little shorter, right? So that's kind of my take. And Sean, I know you've spoken, in depth with our consultants, so maybe share a bit on their thoughts.
Yeah, I would definitely hate to be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that the guy who spoke to us about space planning was one of the endearing qualities. I'm pretty sure it was this consultant where they had different names for different types of workers, and categorize people in all these different fun ways. And so absolutely, that was almost a selling point for this particular group and the team they assembled. And it's obviously something they're highly qualified at. So that's huge. And it's definitely included as a portion of this, whether it happens before or after. I don't think it really matters a whole lot to us as staff per se, but yeah, that mission will be accomplished. It's part of looking at what you need. That's part of the assessment of them determining whether any building is sufficient for its current use, much less its future or potential uses. And so all those things are baked in the cake. It might not be, listed as explicitly or detailed, and that could be just me putting things in PowerPoint using design ideas to make it prettier. But again, certainly were things that were elements of what we were doing, and to a lot of people's points, I think this is in Councilor or Mayor Pro Tem Remington's point. I agree. I don't think staff really disagrees with this conversation here at all. I think that we totally see both sides. We certainly have buildings in our mind that we would sell right now, or we would tell you shouldn't put a cent into. That's not really our position here, but I think we can absolutely see both sides of what you guys are saying and the difficulty of making that decision. But the idea, I believe, behind this whole exercise is to provide the facts that have never been provided before, and provide hard data and things that weren't just opinions either of staff or of council or of administration. This is hard data that anybody can observe, repeat, and produce again, and we can make sound decisions and feel confident moving forward in any direction. So I think that's where we were hoping that this ultimately leads to. Again, the art of getting to the final contract, I think we can order these around a little bit. Will it change the dollar figure? It may. Is it going to change it substantially? We don't know yet. That's why, again, this is a lot of what are our outcomes? And that's, I think, how we kind of got stuck is there was a little bit of disagreement, it seemed, after the last meeting as to what our ultimate goal was. And then coming to committee, there was more consensus on the original set of outcomes. And so that's sort of how we are today, is kind of back to this. We don't want all of it, but we want all of it ultimately.
Thank you, Sean, for being up front and helping us answer some of our questions. Councilmember Schaefer, you had your hand up. Did you still want to provide input?
Well, actually, you made the guidance that I was, or the suggestion that I was going to make, Mike, is have Steve and Sean provide their input. But just to make sure that everyone understands, certainly the space assessment is an important part of this. Along with that, how staff operates together, efficiency of operation, and community input as well. All of that is part of this assessment. So a number of things that you, Councilmember Lingle, I think that you specifically mentioned, are included in this. They're not included as, and Steve or Sean, correct me if I'm wrong, they're not included as our phase one item. I'm not sure exactly which phase it is offhand. And I'd be fine in reordering that if that was workable. But we are doing that, and that information is essential going forward, whether we stay in any of these buildings or go to a new city hall. We need that regardless.
Thank you, Rick. We do have a couple of other items. This item is on the city council meeting for further discussion or even a vote. And I realize there's a lot of questions here. We could choose to pull it and say, we're just not ready to talk further or get to a point where we can vote. I think we had some serious questions. I do appreciate hearing that the 600,000, that was a key question Dot asked, one that others had as well, that's pretty much on hold. We're not going to move forward with doing something with that building until we have this study done, an assessment of space needs, because we don't want to waste money here. I guess I'm just pretty convinced inside that this study is really critical. I'm not telling you I don't cringe at the number, the cost of this at $285,000 or so. That's a lot of money for our town. But again, I think this is one of the most important things that we're working on. I don't think we should be in a hurry on it. But I also understand at some point we need to be able to make a decision and move forward. Are there, how many council members want to continue to have the discussion and have it on the city council agenda? And then I'll ask who wants to pull it, for tonight. If you do, this is a big decision. And, I realize we're not all going to probably get completely comfortable, but or even agree. We may have disagreement in whether to move forward. But it is on the council meeting tonight. And I'm just trying to get a sense here, because I've actually got it in my notes, whether to pull it or not. And that's up to you as city council. How many would like to continue the discussion and leave it on the council meeting? So it looks like that's a majority of us. So I'm happy to just leave it there and we can continue discussion and think about it. We could certainly see if enough council members want to move it forward, but I always ache inside when I know there's serious concerns or unanswered questions. We don't want to rush something, and I've heard that from certainly Public Works, that they're trying to get us what we need as well. And it's sometimes tough to get there. Well, let's move on to our next topic. I'll leave it on council for now, and we'll have more discussion. Our next item is first quarter 2021 finance report from Dana Mason, our finance director. Dana?
Good evening, council. Dana Mason, finance director. Share my screen here. And hopefully you can all see that. So this is just a really high level summary of the first quarter. Revenue, 25.5% of the biennium is complete and 11.6% of revenue has been received. If you'll see here in the general fund, it's a little lower than the 12.5. That's because the city receives property tax. The bulk of it comes in towards the end of April, early May. So we'll see that at around 25% towards the end of next month, or this month actually. And then that also affects the special revenue funds because 20% of property tax goes into the street fund, which is in this line item as well. And for expenditures, 8.8% has been spent, and debt service expenditures don't typically happen until June. So that's why that number is so low. And of course, we haven't started a lot of our capital projects, so that number is low as well. Taxes, as I just said, property tax only 2% has received as of the end of March. Utility tax 13.3 was received, and sales tax was a big winner, 15.2% received, and that does not include the construction sales tax. The city had one of its biggest months of sales tax, or the biggest month ever actually, in February this year, and that's sales tax revenue that's received from December. And then also, typically the second half of the year has the bulk of the property sales tax in it. So because of the summer months, we start building up. So this is really looking really good. General fund expenditures, we're running around normal. Salaries and wages are 11% of the budget. Personnel benefits are a teeny bit low just because we've had some shortages in the police department. So we're not paying the medical benefits that we are normally doing. Instead, we're paying overtime. Building permanent revenue. So far this year, the city's issued 25 single multi-family housing permits compared to 15 for the same period in the final year, or sorry, the same period last year. Building permit fees, 15% of the budget revenues come in for the biennium, and plan check fees about 12%. Water utilities, or all of the utilities, water revenue is about 13% of budgeted for the biennium. Expenditures 10, sewer revenue 16.5, and sewer expenditures are a little bit higher because of the water skid project that is being carried over from the prior year. So some of those expenditures are here. And then storm revenue is looking really good at 17% for the biennium. And then these are the GFC charges, and this is just directly related to those 24 permits that were issued the first part of the year. REIT. So we've 29 units have been sold. It was from January to March compared to 36 in 2020 and 62 in 2019. But the average sale per unit is up 634,000. And I think our next bit of REIT is going to be a good surprise. So the city averaged it. We received 89,000, almost 90,000 in REIT revenue, and it's about an average about 3,100 per unit sold. Impact fees through March. So we didn't receive any impact fees through March in 2020 because of the developer credits, but we're starting to see a trickle. This is from two single housing family permits that were issued. And we should see just kind of a trickle through this year and then the bulk of it in 2022. And then finally, just fund balance. We started off the year about $3.1 million more than we had anticipated with our fund balance. So our ending fund balance is about $3.2 million over, $3.2 million over what we budgeted. And the net change, so far this year, we've had growth or change in fund balance of about $1.2 million. And you can see it's a little lower in the general fund, but again, that's just because property tax revenues come in kind of staggered. So we'll see. It shouldn't be a negative amount in the next couple of months. And then you can see the bulk of the ending fund balance, the change to fund balance is down here in the utility funds. And that is all I have, nice and fast. Are there any questions?
Councilmember Lingle, sorry.
Dana, you casually mentioned something to me that I think is important for council to know, and maybe I misunderstood it. But you and I had just a very brief exchange to discuss reserves. And you said some rules had changed around reserves. And unless there are separate council resolutions around designating separate reserve funds, that they just remain part of the general fund, and that the budget resolution that we did at the end of the year was insufficient. If I'm understanding that correctly, or if I'm not, would you explain that a little bit for everyone on council?
I think this is more has to do with the financial statement reporting. So the way the financial or the auditor's office, it's a new Gatsby rule that's come out. So ending fund balance is now going to be categorized as committed, well, restricted, meaning restricted from an external source. Committed would be restricted by the city's highest law, so an ordinance or a resolution. And then we have, assigned, which is where we say, we're not doing it through resolution, but we'd like to set this money aside for something else, kind of like an idea that we have. And then everything else is uncommitted. So, but we don't, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I think that's a very important point because we spent a huge amount of time in the budget process speculating about, particularly in community development, but speculating about the need to prepare for future reserve needs, particularly related to capital improvement projects. But in the case of community development and planning, we know that there's always a residual liability, if you will, for inspections, and permit money has already come in. So, but we have the back end responsibility to inspect. So I would like to be sure that if there is additional council actions that we need to take, solidifying those reserves, that we do it. And because I think the intent was very, very clear in the budget process. And I want to make sure that we do whatever we can to make sure that pattern, that building of those reserves and those various funds occurs and is not confused with any other rules.
If any money is transferred into or put into a special revenue fund, it's automatically considered assigned. So it's assigned for a specific purpose. But if you wanted it to, for very, very slight, if it was, for example, our REIT fund, that money is restricted. So that would be
Right.
restricted because of the, yeah, RCW. But anything just sitting right now in the building permit fund would be considered assigned already for that specific purpose.
So are you saying there is not additional action that would be desirable for us to take to make sure that those funds are continuing to be built for the purposes of community development and planning?
I don't think so, just because all of the revenues that we're receiving from those functions are going right into that fund. So, but I mean, it's certainly something, I don't know that we would need to do that.
Maybe we should talk about it in the finance meeting.
Yeah, that's a good idea. That's a good idea.
Thank you. Other questions from council? Councilmember Schaefer.
You're on mute.
Rick, I think we still have you on mute, Rick. Sorry.
Okay, thank you very much. Sorry. Dana, you went through that pretty quickly. Any concerns, anything you'd like to highlight out of all of that?
I'd say sales tax, I mean, makes me really excited. It just, last month, I didn't send this out to council, but I sent it out to the FAC. Our sales tax revenue almost doubled for the month of April, which is, it's crazy. And a big chunk of it was sales tax from construction, because we're pulling that out right now. And I think that's a great idea. But a lot of it is our retail. So thank you, residents of Duval, for your online purchases. That's great.
Okay, no, thank you.
Councilmember Naplin.
One thing I wanted to mention, and I brought it up one other time when I brought forward a proposal of reserving some of the sales tax revenue, because I believe more than just the construction line item sales tax is construction related. If you look in the retail sales and warehousing and manufacturing, there's a lot of construction related sales tax that is not specifically identified as construction. There's a lot of people buying appliances, roof trusses, large landscape contracts, bringing in money in other categories. These do not fall under construction. And you have a lot of people moving in, they're buying new furniture, they're buying appliances, there's a lot of sales tax revenue that I believe is related to the boom in the housing market. And I think we need to be a little bit careful to count our chickens before our eggs, or I have it backwards, but how much of this sales tax is sustainable and how much of it is really one time. And there's also an aspect that these home purchases and going out to eat locally and getting takeout, how long, I think there is a boost in that. And once things go back to normal, what is our sales tax going to look like? So I do think we need to be a little bit cautious to not anticipate that this level of sales tax is sustainable. And my other piece of feedback, and I guess we could talk about it during finance and administration, is the school impact fees are flowing through as revenue and expenditure, and the timing doesn't always line up. And I think it skews the end numbers and makes things a little bit confusing of how much revenue we really have and how much expenditures we have. And so I don't even know if there's a solution to have kind of one-time money or pass-through money identified in a way that we could look at the bottom line without being skewed by those things. Because I think a lot of times we want the big picture, they want the bottom line, but when the bottom line has all these things that confuse the numbers, it's very difficult to try to take that, stand back and try to get an understanding.
Well, if you, we put down I put down the revenue for the school impacts, but I certainly just kind of say, okay, this is the amount that we received, or I could do a chart for school impact fees so you can see what's coming and going, But we pay the impact fees the month after they're received. So there's always going to be a lag. And we're cash basis. Yeah.
Anyway, we can talk about it at finance, but I
And I agree about your comment about the sales tax. I mean, I know a lot of it's development related, but it's really heartening, especially to see, the February sales tax, and a lot of that was retail. Construction, was making its way back a little bit, but that was, people buying stuff. So.
No, it's amazing. I love it that people are buying local and having things delivered or shipped to their house. That's
Dina, I just want to say I like the way you lay out our reports. I know it's taken a lot of work over the last year to kind of get them squared away. We know a lot more good things are coming with OpenGov in terms of the way it's laid out, the way we can look at data, have a dashboard that can be looked at pretty much at any time. But thank you, very well done. I really appreciate it, and certainly we'll send you questions if we have any more.
Okay.
Thank you. Our next item is sign code update with our city attorney, Daniel Kinney, and Laura Thomas, Director of Community Development. We have probably less than the 10 minutes. Is that something you think we can get done on that razor thin timeline?
I do think that we can get at least the first 10 minutes done and then take the break. But if you want to, it is 10:48. Gosh, hopefully it's not that late. It is 6:48. So if you would like to go ahead and break now at the cow, Daniel's going to be at our meeting. So it's not a big deal. It's probably about a 10-minute conversation. So it would be really tough to probably try and shove it in right now.
Well, I'll ask council's feedback. How many would like to move that forward right now? Not seeing any hands. I think we're taking a break. We'll move that to city council meeting under, is that under new business?
We could either put it under administration or we could put it under new business. Well, yeah,
No,
new
it wouldn't
business.
No, it wouldn't be a new business item because you're not asking for any type of decision or anything. So I think admin report or presentation.
Well, let's go for that admin.
Okay.
I'm liking that. Well, thank you, everyone. With that, our committee of the whole is adjourned. We'll see you at 7 o'clock at our city council meeting. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.